So, my friends, this lecture, Evolutionary Stages of Individual and Group Consciousness. Now, on the face of it, this is a very straightforward lecture. The guide talks about how we alternate between periods where individual consciousness is emphasized to where group consciousness is emphasized. He takes a historical perspective. Then he talks about, later on in the lecture, the different stages of identifying with the individual or the group, and there's positive and negative, just negative distortions and also positive ways for each of those to manifest. Then he talks about something called mass consciousness as opposed to group consciousness. So this lecture seems to be about the evolution of mankind. It's also about our personal evolution and how we relate to groups and the alternation between being an individual and being a member of a group, and the negative and positive reasons for both, kind of in a nutshell. All right, so the guide talks about, second paragraph, is often said that this period of your history, the Aquarian age or the New Age, is bringing in a new group consciousness. So he says that, the vaunted individualism that I suppose occurred during the Enlightenment, that there was a group consciousness, I would think, in the medieval times, where it was all about the allegiance to the king, the church, to the Enlightenment, where the individual was celebrated. Now it's time again for us to turn toward the group. And I think that's become pretty evident, because if we aren't able to create a world government of some sort, the nations are not able to unite, we're probably going to blow ourselves up. It is not going to go well if we cannot make the step, as the guide says, from nation states to a world government. So I guess that's what they call about the globalists, right? But we have to regretfully put ourselves in that category, because I think we all have to. The guide says that there will be another stage after this time of nation states where a world government will be created. So the guide first begins with a kind of historical perspective and says that at the dawn of human evolution, there were only a few human beings scattered over the earth. Each individual lived more or less alone. And that's kind of interesting, because I was looking at a article in a scientific journal the other day, which says our ancestors may have come close to extinction 900,000 years ago. I guess it's probably reversed. So the guy, this scientific journal says that about 900,000 years ago, there were only about 1,300 people on the earth. And it stayed that way for about 100 years, more than that, actually. There was a period where, from 930,000 years ago to 815,000 years ago, there were only about 1,280 breeding individuals. So, our development was almost choked off in those days. There were very few people. And as the guide says,
how did they know that? Did they?
Well, they did genetic analysis of genomes all over the world, and they were able to compare and look at that and go back in time to determine how many people there were at that time in history.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it fascinating? It's called, it's a journal, let's see, the Shanghai Institute of Nutrition and Health. But obviously the number of people on the earth has fluctuated greatly
They probably
historically. And so in those early times, people were afraid of each other. Only small groups of people wandered the earth. And when you encountered another group, you were afraid, it was kill or be killed. And so, as the guide says,
not much has changed.
Not much has changed, right? So as people then took shelter in groups, in tribes and clans. And the tribes and clans then could war among each other, but you derived strength from your membership in the clan or the tribe. So then we progress to where the guide says, interestingly enough, warfare created unity, because when you had to go to war against another group, you discovered you had to be a strong group. You had to be strong and find the value of the individuals as contributing to the group so that you were strong enough to fight another group. So one of these paradoxes, right, that the necessity of fighting created a cohesive group. So that's going back a long ways. He says, human beings already understood to some degree that they needed others to cooperate in fighting the enemy, whether this was the elements, beasts, or other clans. The lessons learned at this stage could then be brought into the following phase, enriching a group consciousness. Later, as the population increased, humanity developed the ability to cope with the elements. People learned to take care of themselves more efficiently. And then he jumps to today, but humanity is now ready for a new influx, so that those who resist the movement will experience a painful crisis, while those who follow it will experience unprecedented richness and blessings. Now that's an interesting, very interesting what he says, and I think we should discuss that. What is meant by those who resist the movement will experience a painful crisis, while those who follow it will experience unprecedented riches and blessing. So I want to read a couple of paragraphs on page 4 to kind of keep going on that vein. He says, humanity as a whole is ready to approach a much deeper phase of group consciousness. The natural manifestation of this, if followed, would be the transformation of nations into one human government. Religious differences would disappear because the one would be recognized as undifferentiated. All humanity could apply laws of equality, justice, and love to all, sharing the wealth of the earth. New laws and new approaches would be instituted that would yield undreamed of results. The other would no longer be the enemy. But since humanity, by and large, resists this natural development, those who follow it necessarily separate from those who do not. They create their own communities where this new spirit will increasingly manifest. In the meantime, the great new movement, halted by the resistors, manifests in a distorted way. This is why you find today the regrettable manifestations of group consciousness in overpopulation, overcrowded cities, in the emergence of monopolies in which large groups master the masses and dictate laws and values, the self-alienation of overcrowded living and working in which human qualities give way to robotic qualities is by now well known. Now, this really echoes the words of Pope Francis, who has written several letters which really directly address this whole issue of what the guide calls mass consciousness, which is basically a kind of rapacious technological standardizing consciousness that stamps people in makes people interchangeable, robotic, doesn't respect individuals, and stamps out individuality in the name of technological advancement and efficiency, and I guess making our industrial civilization even more competitive and more stressful for everyone. So I do want to talk about this idea of spiritual people, I guess, create their own communities where this new spirit will increasingly manifest. Now, do we see an evidence of this? How's that happening in the world? What exactly is going on between these two groups the guide talks about, the people that resist the influx of the Christ consciousness, the New Age, the Aquarian Age, and the people who go with it? All right. So I guess I'll just give another points here that the guide talks about. That's the theme of the second half of the lecture, about how some people are willing to allow for the expansion of consciousness and other people are not prepared to do that. The halted movement of group consciousness expresses itself in large groups selfishly running the masses, big concerns in which all personal connection to others, to employers, to aspects of the work itself is almost lacking. Now that reminds me of my stepson who works in the Amazon warehouse in Denver. He describes it as pretty dehumanizing. He does a night shift and they're continually getting people to work harder and harder. and people are completely interchangeable, and they just keep working these people. They have no union. These and many more such manifestations in your modern life are not the result of overpopulation, but of halting the movement of consciousness, of not feeling and following it. Modern people are small cogs in a big machine, depersonalized because they halted both movements, their own individuation and the group consciousness. So what he's saying there is that there's a distortion of both individuation and group consciousness. In the distortion of individuation, people are expecting the group to do it for them. They're not taking responsibility, developing themselves. And in the distortion of group consciousness, people are giving into a group consciousness, which the guide calls mass consciousness, which is depersonalizing, robotic, and not seeking out the good in every individual. Instead, what it does is it seeks a way for a small group of people in charge to have power. All right. So, this is pretty heavy, right?
Alan,
yeah.
can I just,
Go ahead.
this lecture was like 50 years ago.
Yes.
Given 50 years ago.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering if there's maybe, it was like more relevant then in terms of the movements and the groups, and that maybe I don't know, maybe the cycle has gotten even tighter or something, or worse or something. I mean, it seems that the movements like towards spiritual consciousness seems to have been distorted, with born again Christians and movements, people sort of their God is the best God or the only God. And I guess I'm not aware of spiritual movements that are upholding this consciousness. It's just, and maybe just because of the news, the two wars that are going on now, that it feels that there's not that much of the positive group spiritual consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree with you, because I mean, when he says about that religions will, the religious differences will disappear because everyone will recognize that there's one God. That doesn't seem to be happening, but that depends on us, I guess, right? Yeah, where's that phrase? Try to find that. It was on page 4. Yeah. The natural manifestation of this, if followed, would be the transformation of nations into one human government. Religious differences would appear because the one would be recognized as undifferentiated. All humanity would apply laws of equality, justice, and love to all, sharing the wealth of the earth. Well, that's something that we all hope is going to happen. And I guess it's up to us to some degree to make it happen and help it happen.
So
Yeah,
one
so
thing
Kevin.
to add to that, on page 4, the guide says in the second paragraph, let me give you a specific example of something that is happening right now. And I want to put quotes around right now because humans tend to think of right now as right now. Okay, but I think the guide is really emphasizing here that this movement that he's speaking of is more like the Enlightenment was. If you look at what right now was across the entire Enlightenment, you're talking about hundreds of years. And so when you're talking about this movement into a group consciousness, you should also appreciate it in terms of hundreds of years, or at least 100 years, because the process of that will bring certain tribal areas to light, just like our work individually brings certain areas within our consciousness to light, and it fights back within each of us. So in the case of the global consciousness, I would assume the same kind of rebellion of stuck matter or of stuck energy would then fight against that globalization on a positive level. And then, yeah, of course, there'll be costs associated with that that would be learned through the process of what it means as a global consciousness to hold on to these areas of lower self within the global consciousness.
Right, as the guide says also somewhere that the Earth itself has a lower self.
Right, exactly.
The planet itself, and certain aspects are being worked out of the planet's lower self. Now, does that
The
mean?
guy says that, the earth itself.
Yeah, it's here.
Yeah, it's in this
It's in this
lecture.
lecture.
So like,
Yeah.
okay, Ukraine, I'm looking at you, or okay, Russia, I'm looking at you, Putin. But
For the earth.
that's not the Earth, but how do you, if the Earth itself, we're not talking about the oceans and the plant and the trees and the animals, right? I mean, if the Earth has a lower self, what do you think that means? I mean, I think it
Can you
means,
just find the sentence?
yeah, let me find that. I'm not making this up.
Do you remember reading? Joel's read this now, but.
Yeah, no,
no,
I saw it
read
also.
It says
It's
the
in
earth
here.
Yeah,
itself
self
has-
along itself, yeah. Yeah, I mean, a negative aspect, I think, is what he means, you know, so there is a negativity that you're.
Well, I know there's like areas where the energy. in the earth
Energy.
Yeah, yes, I think
Is
that's right.
higher
Maybe
than
that's,
lower.
yeah.
The energy, like the
But,
balance of the
yeah.
energy. So in other words,
How
the title is not positive.
How-
There is a negative aspect to it.
Yeah, but it's not
That's what it
geological
is, I'm
only.
like,
It's
well,
not
that's what
talking
I'm
about the
trying to
geological
understand.
Earth as we term it. I believe when I read it, it was clear enough that it's talking about the collective consciousness, including us, that we're not separate from the Earth. And so therefore the consciousness of the Earth is the entire Earth sphere. Yeah,
So
we are part of that.
Because I think of when you say the earth, I'm thinking of the natural
the
Planet.
nature,
yeah.
the
Right,
trees
Yeah.
and the,
right.
you know.
And I don't want to assume we are the only consciousness here,
Yeah.
of
Well,
course,
that's true too.
right? So,
Yeah.
so
I mean,
hence,
there's
yeah,
there's a consciousness right there.
right,
Sitting
Yeah.
beside you.
exactly,
Hanging out.
exactly.
Well, he also in another lecture, he says the earth has a soul also. I
Yeah.
remember reading that.
Yeah.
Right, a collective soul.
It has a
Right.
soul, meaning that the way I see that is that the earth, everything that's alive is an entity.
Right, the earth is
Yeah.
definitely alive.
Yeah,
Right.
it's alive, so it's an
Yeah.
entity. So therefore.
Oh, here
there
it is, here it
an
is.
essence to it That,
I found it.
yeah.
Okay,
Page.
Page 5. You often find individuals who are ready to move into the next phase of being self-responsible and establishing their own channel, but are unwilling to do so. I might say you have all found this resistance on your path when encountering your lower self. Since the planet also has a lower self, there are factions of people who express a similar resistance. So you must differentiate between being unable to take on selfhood individually and being unwilling to do so, insisting that others, parents or groups, give you the sustenance that only the divine self can give. So yeah, I think clearly he's talking about groups of people then that are reluctant because of their own personal inertia, lower self qualities, to perform the sacrifice to allow the raising of consciousness. Yeah. So the guide, of course.
Alan, can I say something?
Of course.
I would find it, I've been thinking about this, as I'm sure everybody else has since all this started in October 7th. And I would find it very helpful if we could go into ourselves personally and find where we resist that, where we resist being self-responsible. And I can certainly start, because as you were talking, I was reflecting and trying to find that aspect in me that doesn't want to move forward. And as some of you know, I have recently, my marriage of 45 years has recently fallen apart. And so I find myself alone and self-responsible. Now, I'm a very responsible person. I can take care of, whatever. I've always been able. But there is a part of me that is just really pissed off that I have to take care of everything. And even though I'm able to do it, and it wouldn't be such a big deal, but I just resent it. I don't like it. And what you were talking about, Alan, in reading this, and then, what we were all talking about, seems to be, I identify with that in this way. And I think it would be very helpful in terms of healing that aspect, which is why we're all here, to do healing. And the only place we can do that really is within ourselves. So I would find that very helpful. I don't know if anybody else agrees, but that's where I would like to see this go for a moment. Does this resonate with anybody here?
Joel, you want to say something? Hold on. Let me move it over to you, Joel. Stand by. Here, Joel.
Yeah, first of all, let me just say that I'm very sorry to hear about your loss.
It was a loss and a gain.
Okay, well,
Mostly a gain at this point.
okay, well, God bless you for
Thank you.
bless you for being able to find your way to that. So, the answer to the question, how do we find our obstacles? It's just being aware, in each moment when there's some kind of, Traci will call it a ping, where there's some kind of separation between us and our higher self or peace, calm. So I give you a simple example. My daughter's birthday was yesterday. I see this beautiful.
My mother's too.
And I see this article in the New York Times about the ultimate chocolate cake. I love to bake and I love chocolate. And I brought it to Traci's attention and she says, "Oh, that would be nice. I would love to have that cake." And I thought about it. And then I realized that I didn't make it, but later in the day, yesterday, which was my daughter's birthday, I realized, oh my God, I never even thought to make the cake for her. And then I'm giving myself a hard time, what's wrong with you? And blaming her, what has she done that make me not even think about making her a cake on her birthday? And then I was sort of, in that state of mind for a couple of hours. And then I said to myself, you're in your lower self. You're giving your self a hard time. You're coming up with this expectation about what you should have done or didn't do and all this stuff. And then I let it go. And I realized I just gave myself an explanation. But so in the answer to what you're asking was, so I was just alert to what I was feeling. I let myself stay with the feeling. It was okay. I didn't push it away, where for whatever reason, screw her. I'm not making her a cake. She's a bitch. She's done this. She's done that. And then I just said, okay, so you didn't think to make a cake for her. And that doesn't mean you don't love her. And then and I'm still working on it and saying to myself, well, what have I done to cause this feeling of separation and not wanting to make her the cake? So it's just, I think this answer of where is the lower self manifesting in us and what do we do about it? It's a matter of being alert to what's going on with us through the day, being present to whatever we're feeling and thinking, and then being the observer self, reflecting on it and allowing it to be, and then grace, meditation, or using our tools to try to get back in touch, in connection with the unified state that underlies everything, and then the truth will show itself, and maybe it's just, as Traci reminds me quite often, just recognizing that there's some sort of a block, there's something that we'd like to change, and even if we don't know how, the guide tells us that it will start to unravel. The knot will start to untie, and space will come into whatever that is. So I hope that that's helpful. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Joel.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I think that's constructive, obviously, Sonia, to how we have to grapple with our lower selves and grapple with this issue of raising our own consciousness. Because of course, whatever is outside there is a picture of it pictures our internal state. There's something about the world and us that it mirrors. We mirror the world inside.
Right. And I also feel that in studying the lectures, I mean, I haven't been, in this kind of a forum for a long time, but, I've spent a long time in silence, and I've changed, my perceptions have changed. And I think that discussing a lecture or a concept has value, but I think it has much more value if we apply it to our personal process in the moment. Otherwise, it becomes something really abstract and interesting, but doesn't really ignite the energy in ourselves to make a shift.
I mean, I'm just preoccupied with this idea about how the people that are not resisting the movement of the Christ consciousness and the movement into the new age, how we create our own communities. Is it online? I mean, that's a practical question, I think, I do respect what you're saying, which is that the personal process, you can make it intellectual exercise. You've got to feel the reality of these different spiritual states. It's also practical. In other words, how are these new communities forming? Are they forming? Are we off track? I mean, are people finding ways to get together online? What exactly is going on with this planetary transformation stuff?
Well, I don't know if it's planetary transformation, but it seems to me that it's anytime two people are together, that it's a community, and there can be good feeling or bad feeling, or anywhere in between. But it's like in the present moment. I know you may be talking about communities that are more long lasting or more codified in some way, but to me it seems that it's just in your approach to our lives, that the people that we encounter are our community.
Teresa.
So I agree with you. Sonia, is it?
Yes, I'm Sonia.
Hi.
Hi.
I agree with you 100% that for me 100%, the way that I work with the lectures is, we do these discussion groups, but it's really the personal work of how I can bring it home to what's going on inside, and being able to, as Joel was saying, recognize when something's not, is not aligned, and try to, raise the awareness and make the shifts. And the reason I was really drawn to this lecture was because I just felt like I could see it at the macro level of the politics and the splits and and then the micro level myself. Like, I'm part of a big family. I have a lot of siblings, and we're all getting older, closer to retirement, and there's changing just happening there. And I'm noticing, how, how the group dynamics are. And, I've been struggling with feeling left out, but so then this resonated with me of like, how do I connect? Do I speak my truth, or do I just try to agree to fit in? So that dualism between, the mass consciousness where everybody has to agree, the homogenous state which is what I see reflected a lot in our politics and stuff, is happening inside. Like, do I feel like I personally have to agree? I'm an Italian family, and we have that little bit of, bullying kind of thing. Well, everybody has to agree, or do, how can I be more present in my own personal group? Because I feel like I've been able to do that outside of my family, with my Pathwork family, with my work family. I can always be more truthful and in myself. And I always feel like, why don't I feel that way with my family? Like I feel like I'm on. So I'm working on that personally. And then I do feel it reflected everywhere I go. It's, it's amazing when something's so at the surface in your own personal work, how you just all of a sudden you see it everywhere. So yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Beverly, any thoughts? Putting you on the spot.
No, I'm just listening. It's very interesting. I mean, I can kind of see the macro. When I was looking at the lecture, which I didn't get to finish it, I was mostly thinking about the wars. I wasn't thinking about it so much, but how I'm personalizing it is I'm looking at the difference between my tendency to isolate versus my tendency to connect to groups. That's just how I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, well, that's certainly a big theme in the lecture. Yeah, conformity within a group and individuality within a group, and isolation as an individual and reaching out as an individual.
I have something, I guess, to share, a little bit of a different point of view, or maybe a more microscopic point of view than even the most microscopic that's been stated so far. I think how I applied this lecture to my own personal work tends to be not looking at the earth, not looking at my family anymore, even though that was certainly a phase for me where I needed to apply externally as the group. But now it's becoming the group consciousness within me. It's seeing myself as a group and myself as having all of these various voices that wanted to stand up for various parts of me and perhaps feared exposure. Okay. And of course, that's reflected in the relationships in the outside world. It's not like there's this demarcation where this fight exists only within. That's ridiculous, right? I mean, at least from once you're through the path a certain amount, you see that whatever the fight is within you, that's going to be reflected externally. And so, yeah, you can perceive that in the manifestation out there, or you can kind of take the shortcut, I guess I would call it, to see it within the manifestation in here. And if you can do that in the process, I mean, that's kind of what I took from what Sophia was saying, is that at least in my interpretation of it, is to apply this lecture as what parts of me feel I'm not enough, or what parts of me fear that exposure. If I look on page 6, there are 2 paragraphs, which when I read it the first time on the train coming in, I didn't read it as out there. Okay, I read it immediately as like, wow, those are like 2 different ways of being. And yeah, there are parts of me that alternate between those ways. So, maybe I think I would like to do, if it's okay with you, is to read those 2 paragraphs and to share a little bit about what I highlighted on those paragraphs so that we can see, maybe, just like a lot of the tools that the guide provides to us are ways in which to see through a lens into our nature. I saw these 2 paragraphs in a similar fashion, another tool, let's say. So it starts now on page 6, I believe it is, sorry, and it's toward the end, okay, the last 2 paragraphs. It says, now in your particular community, and again, I read that as within first, okay, within your particular community, you will find that each of these 3 phases of human consciousness represented. Even people who are on the whole sufficiently highly developed to form part of this new age community living here. So this is parts of us that we think, oh yeah, we're elevated, we got it. Of course we got it. No problem. I'm ready for it. Okay. Have areas within them that represent lower phases. You all know this and have been working with these aspects, it says. You find that a part in you where you desperately need others because you fear you are not enough. Okay, so that's one side of the phase I would, as I was reading from at least this, okay, and have not actualized your inner God. This does not mean that you should now separate yourself from the group, for alone you could hardly accomplish this task of development. But you need to be aware of your wish to misuse the group in order to avoid meeting yourself. So this is again, fear of you're not enough, let's say. The second part, I go to the next paragraph here, the guide states, and you also find that part in you that rebels against the group and wants to shun it because you fear exposure and rejection. So, I mean, the lower self-work, Traci, just pause for a second there, the lower self-work that I did, that's where it was mostly at for me. I don't know, everybody's a little different. But the months that I was dragging into and dredging through and having those conversations, I was arguing back and forth about, no, don't you dare tell me what I am. You know, don't you dare tell me how I feel in this situation. You haven't talked to me. You haven't even, you know, brought me out in order to let me shine. Okay, and that's what my lower self was telling me at the time. You know, your confidence, huh? You're not confident. You know, you hid away the best part of your light. Damn it. And it was, you know, yelling at me in a sense and working through that. So in that sense, I equated a little bit more most of my own personal struggle with this paragraph personally. Okay. But again, everybody's a little different, right? So it states here, you know, you fear your need and your weakness because you do not yet know how to function without the pretenses of your mask and your defensive gains. Again, this does not mean that you should now abandon all your individual needs and forms of self-expression and submerge into the amorphous group organism. And again, like how I read that was the parts of me that need that strength and that individuation, that parts of me that needed that voice should be harnessed when I could, you know? And not covered over and say, oh, no, I need to be spiritual here, or I need to see, oh, I'm one entity. Honestly, F that, okay? Because that's just another mask of, for me at least, personally in my work, that was a mask of just spiritual, you know, pretending, let's say, internally, right? Oh yeah, of course, because 50% of me sees it, then of course all of me sees it. That's not how it works. You know, so it was reading this that I went, oh yeah, well, okay. So, and then it just continued on. It says it merely, and this was the part that actually mirrors what my own lower self-work mostly entailed and still entails when I'm honest with myself. It merely means to see and pay attention and understand and proceed from there. And you know, I really put down for my own self next to it, it's about internal integration, and it's about, you know, for me personally, assuring my lower self that it's heard, because it's easy for me to not listen when it's there. It's easy for me to just push it away to the side. So anyway, that's my sharing. I mean, that's where I'm at, Sonia.
Right, the lower self also needs to be acknowledged and accepted.
Yeah.
Lest we forget.
And so thank you, Sonia, for your insight there about applying.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. That's really gave me a lot of things to think about.
Marion, you had a thought.
Yes. Yes, I have some thoughts because I think maybe not everyone here, but people I've gotten together with here in person and on Zoom, that I always filter all of my connections, and that means here on this Zoom call too, through my personality defense type of emotion. I think everybody's getting kind of ready, you know, knows that. And so I'm very much for everybody knowing what their emotion, what their particular personality defense is, and their dominant higher self, divine self. So mine being emotion, I like
Marian,
what the
I
guys,
just want to say, I kind of know what you're talking about, but I don't resonate with that regarding myself.
I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. What do you mean? What?
Well, you said everybody here, you know, seems to understand that or something, and I'm thinking, I don't look at myself from that perspective.
That's all right. I said,
Okay.
I bring
Okay.
it forth in these meetings. I bring it forth. I don't dictate to anyone. I don't tell anybody else what to do. I say, I go through that filter. Some people here laugh because they know I bring it up, because my response to this meeting tonight isn't going to be the same as everybody else's, and my needs are different. And so I know the first part of the meeting, the first half hour is your presentation, Alan. And that makes me feel secure because the guide said it's being grounded in the conceptual, not intellectual, conceptual, that makes us safe to transform our emotion body, our emotions. And so I'm one that I like to, go that first half hour and we're all getting the conceptual. So I'm just sharing. I always get to a sharing personally because I like to be focused, not intellectual, but focused so this is a personal sharing because I'm right here with other people. So there's some things I'm sharing about my life, that most everybody here knows, that I live alone and I'm quite elderly and I'm dealing with a lot of issues that I've dealt with all my whole pathwork, my whole life. And my main, and that is I have too much to do and not enough time to do it, and beliefs that I keep proving out. So for me, that is painful in my life. So I separate my expansive safe state that's going with the universe, and I'm so expanding. And then there's little me, nasty Marion, and she's here right now. And she says, no, I'm not going. I'm not expanding with anybody, and I'm not going there, and I'm not stepping into the void, and you can't make me. And so I don't have anything, and so I demonstrate it when I'm giving a talk or something with the small groups of those aspects, because I've learned not to resist the resistor, but be empathic toward that aspect of me. So in my life, what I'm doing is because I'm just overloaded with too much to do. I live in a 4-room apartment, and in December, I'll be 87, and I need more help. I can't do all this anymore and do things I love doing, like play my harmonica, paint my pictures, do all that stuff. So it comes down to my images. So my image is that I've got to do it all myself, because in this life, that's how I grew up. The very hardworking Midwestern girl that had to be dictated by my parents to tell me what to do. And I had to work I worked in my father's drugstore. I cut the grass. I did the dishes. I cooked. I did all that stuff. So here I am still at this age dealing with the images. And I'm so grateful that I've gotten all that image help, in the pathwork. So even now, I need more support for finding more help. So people will give me some senior programs that maybe somebody can come in and help do some light cleaning or something. So I made the call today. It took me a month to make that call because part of me doesn't want the help. And that's Marion, who says, no, I got to do it all myself. And even if I don't have any fun, it's familiar.
Yeah.
So that's where I am tonight. I'm with both. And I will, share more about that as we go along, and I hear others' contributions to this, because I value that we do get to sharing. So thank you very much for everybody being here.
Anyone who hasn't spoken want to share it? Juan, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think
Hold
probably
on.
do a little
You
sharing.
want to come over here?
Oh, yeah.
Make it easy?
Over here?
Yeah.
Of course, yes.
Pick up my lecture. Watch the candle on the computer
Oh.
there.
Good call.
It's not bueno. Hey,
There we go.
hello everyone there, beautiful people. Well, I want to share about this. Well, first of all, I have to thank you, Traci. You select the lecture, right?
Yeah.
Or is it Alan?
She did.
No,
Teresa.
Teresa did.
Oh, you did,
This
yeah.
time.
Oh, wow, very nice. Yeah. I don't know, guys. Forgive me if I go too deep with these things, because it's kind of my nature. I tend to go deep with things.
Us too. That's why we're here.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Yay. So I have company. That's great. Well, to me, I don't know, but this lecture explains to me clearly what is going on right now, individually, and well, not for everyone, but individually for most people, and for what's going on outside in the political world, internationally, and everywhere. The way I see this lecture is that we have, as far as I understand, there is a spirit, supreme spirit, that is called God consciousness, Christ consciousness,
Christ consciousness.
inner spirit. I mean, the guy gives
New
many
age
different names to it.
consciousness.
So that spirit is percolating everything. It's actually the substance of what everything that is manifested, right? So from the beginning of time, this spirit has been around because like it's the highest self. It's the highest self, the way I understand it. So this spirit created everything, and there is a time, of course, from the beginning, the spirit has been permeating everything, but there is an ascending process, you know,
Spiral
a
process.
spiral process that has been ascending since the first human being stepped onto the earth, right? So this spirit, from time to time, springs forth in a stronger version of it, basically. And that's a very powerful thing. So I guess the way I see this, it's like a ray of light, you know, that it's a very big, huge, enormous, limitless reservoir of light, of energy that is boiling. And then this is this is a ray of light that projects forth, right? And everything that's created is going to be permeated by this powerful ray of energy. Now, if we individually or, you know, massively resist this power that is springing forth from this reservoir, from this enormous well of energy, it's like, you know, it's like something is pushing forth, right? And then here you come and you try to push against it. So obviously, when you go against something so powerful, you're in the losing end. You know, you are going to experience pain and suffering because you're going against something that is very, very powerful. It's really God itself. So I see that, you know, these two groups of consciousness, like the guy says, if you resist this, you create a mass consciousness, meaning like a blob, you know, you become like a big knob of energy that is negative, that is going to be painful because you're trying to constrain, to restrain, to push against something that is very, very powerful. But if you do that, you know, as a group, then you create that mass, like you said, Alan, that mass consciousness. But if you resist that individually, which is where it all starts, as we all know, it starts with the individual, with that work, with that inner work that we all have to do. As I think Sophia or Sonia was saying earlier, it starts with the individual. So if we resist that powerful energy, we are going to suffer. We are going to experience pain. It's basically we are resisting love. It is all that in the end, the way I see it, boils down to surrendering to that energy, to that force of love that is, you know, is pushing forward, you know, it's coming, surfacing like enormously powerful. And if you go with that force of love, if you surrender to it, then as the guy said on this, you know, on this paragraph here, the way, which I think explains a lot, you know, about the actual lecture. Oh, I left my glasses somewhere. Where did I leave it? Anyway, I think I can read it without it. So let me see. The guy says here on page 4, right? When the new movement is halted, what would express itself in a blessed, rich way can manifest only in a distorted, therefore painful way. You create the distortion by not feeling, not trusting, and not following the course of their inner process. So, right?
Yes.
So that, to me, that is it. You know, it all boils down to that, giving into that power, giving into that force of love, and just allow it to you know, to drive you and go with it rather than resisting it. So when we individually do that, we suffer personally. But of course, everything that's going on, like you're saying, in the micro environments, is also going on in the macro, you know, world or outer world. So because it's a projection, we all are. The outside is only a manifestation of what's going on in each one of us, as a group or as an individual. You know, what you are experiencing yourself is also what the world, you know, of course, it depends on your you know, on your level of growth. But as you cultivate more and more of that love and that positive energy in the individual, we are able to transform this outside world, slowly. But it all starts with allowing that force to really take over us instead of resisting it and fighting against it. So that Christ consciousness is what's going on right now. I think I see that, what's going on in Ukraine and in Israel and Palestine, and it's all that. To me, is very sad what is going on. But clearly, the way I see it is that resistance to that force of love, resisting that love, that powerful force that is coming to the surface. And a lot of us don't want to give into it. We are resisting it with our own actions, with our own way of thinking, with our own emotions and feelings, feelings of hate, feelings of separatism, division, and all these feelings. And all this is projecting in this group of in cultures. And it's going on all around the world. So to me, the way I see it, like the guy explains here, we have down at that level. The whole human race is at a level to change, to move forward, to move to the fifth dimension. And because we are resisting this force of love that is so powerful, we see ourselves stuck into these wars, natural disaster, and all these things that's going on in the world. But it is all because of the resistance that we individually and as a group and as nations are, exercising on this power. Anyway, so that's my version of it. But like I said, it's a little deep, but that's the way I understand it.
Thank you, Juan.
You will.
Yeah, Maria.
I just want to comment on that because I always appreciate the grounding, but in the concepts, and that's what you provide, Juan. I was curious about your own personal experience because you kept saying we, and I was wondering like where your conflicts are, what you're uncovering that you're bringing to the fore.
We always
I get the concepts.
Yeah. We all have our battles. Like I was gonna say also, like me, for example, personally, I live a very kind of like secluded life now, and the guy talks about this because this is the danger, right? When you use that seclusion to run away, to escape, joining the group, and then that's like a subterfuge, I think he calls it also. But when you really allow that separation, that isolation, that time just to be alone, that solitude, to go within and just find those areas of yourself where you are not in harmony, when there is no love, when there is no harmony, when there is a disorder, emotionally, financially, and externally, then you have to look at that and work with that. So I have been, in this style of life for a while now, and I have tried to use that time for that separation, not to turn it into separatism, like the guy says, but really, to go within, because that's where it all starts,
Yeah.
Isn't that self-observation, self-questioning, self-questioning, and in that prayers and meditation, when you just, close your eyes and just see there and just don't think of anything. Just allow the spirit to come in and it's like show you those areas where you are not in harmony with yourself. Meditation is really, really important in this work, guys. I couldn't emphasize it enough.
I have a very easy way that you can get in touch with what you need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
It's by having a relationship.
Well, that's enormously, yeah, very much so.
So
Yes,
I don't have to meditate or go into solitude.
Well,
I just have to walk into the kitchen.
The guy actually says that.
I just have to open my mouth.
Yeah.
Or maybe not even open my mouth. It'll find me.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. But I was there for 13 years.
Okay.
So yeah, well,
okay, maybe. So I'm sorry. Yeah, so I that's what I mean. So please continue to share.
Can I just, responding to Joel, I had that for 46 years, a partner, and, Bill passed away. It'll be just in December. It will be a year. But this season right now is when he had his medical crisis and went to the hospital. And, it's just, I have a lot of memories of the last couple of months of him being alive. It's like, I remember like Halloween last year, I remember, all of those kinds of things. And so for this lecture, for me, being alone, made me feel that to sort of appreciate and honor the space to be alone. And, you know, thinking about how I have been sort of like prepared for it. And that also, I think in the lecture, it talked about, you know, even if you're alone, you still need to ask for help. You still are there, you know, you still interact with people. And I guess that's, you know, like joining in with that other comment I made about communities being just who you're with. I guess maybe that's kind of how I see it right now, that when I interact with people, I want to be present and I don't know, loving. You know, I just had an interaction today where I had to go down to get like my hearing aid repaired, and they have like sort of like open hours where you can bring your hearing aid in. And I had an interaction with the one of the technician, a really bad interaction with him last year, and I was so aware this time of just being communicative with him, open and expressive. And it's almost like I think he had that same wavelength of like, yeah, let's get beyond that. And we had a wonderful, well, wonderful. It was just a really, you know, real, solid human interaction, and it felt very, you know, very good. I don't know. I guess that the other, you know, so that's just personally, you know, what, you know, how I, you know, one of the things, you know, how I took this lecture. But in terms of, you know, Alan, what you're talking about in terms of, you know, like a spiritual group, what I'm wondering is like, does anyone want to talk about like the Pathwork today, the New York Pathwork today versus the Pathwork years ago, and how it might, the energy might change or shift, or is there a different way we want the energy to be now?
That's a good thing to talk about. I'd welcome the discussion about
I actually wanted to, you know, since you bring that up, you know, one of the other things that really drew me to this lecture was, you know, I was part of the Virginia group of Pathworkers, and I went to Seven Oaks for 5 years for the transformation program, and I did, you know, I loved it, and I, you know, was part of that community down there, and they recently are falling apart. You know, Donovan died, and then they sold the center, and you know, so part of I was working on, you know, on the board for Seven Oaks, and we were, you know, reaching out to the people who had all left and saying, you know, come back. And one of the things I proposed was to use this lecture as a, you know, as a sort of, to me, it feels like Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. Like we have to create this new thing. We don't really know what it looks like yet, but we know we have to, you know, move past the mass consciousness and the rebellion, right? That's the dualistic side. And we have to come to something where the individual can flourish and the group can flourish. And I kind of felt at Seven Oaks that, you know, it was pretty hierarchical in a way. And I was like, we need more collaborative thing. So anyway, you know, we didn't really take it anywhere with that group. So I brought it to this group. So now you're talking about the New York Pathwork and, you know, what it means for that. And I actually, you know, I really think it's really hard to create group organizations without modeling like some of the old religion, you know, the hierarchical religion. You know, I just don't like hierarchy and structure, but I guess you need some. But you know, A New Earth really is like, how do we do this in a way that doesn't have the old patterns that we're so used to without falling back to these old, well, you're in charge and then you're second command, you know, the generals and the, you know, I don't really know, but I wanted to explore that and really talk about that. In addition to what I was saying before, is I feel like personally I'm sort of working past that dualistic.
Well,
distinct dualism.
I think it takes a lot of work to generate the enthusiasm, to generate the participation. I mean, I come from it from the place of being a mother and a caretaker and a manager in my business, you know, and knowing that to make something happen, you know, not maybe it requires hierarchy, but also it requires, you know, efforts and you know,
Right.
tasks being done. And I know for myself right now, you know, I feel like my task is myself, you know. I mean, I feel like I'm willing to do something, but I mean, even as, you know, this is like, I want to help the earth, you know, like, you know, environment. I started composting. I mean, it's like what are the little things that I could do? You know, that's where I'm at.
It's about a hierarchy.
Can I,
Yeah, sorry.
Traci,
Wait,
I'm
wait,
sure you have
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, we have to.
Oh, go ahead, guys.
who, me?
Yeah, go ahead, Sonia.
First, I want to say, Barbara, I didn't know that Bill had died, and I'm very sad
Oh.
about that.
Oh.
I had no idea, and I'm very sad. And I remember when you got married in Central Park, right?
At
No.
the cloisters.
At the cloisters, right? I remember that. So I'm very sad about it, and I don't know what else to say except it's kind of shocking.
Yeah, I didn't know you didn't know. Thank you.
No, I didn't know. I ran into a YouTube thing today that was really interesting that I want to bring up because what is your name, the young lady who's next to Alan?
Teresa.
Teresa. What you were talking about made me think of this. Do you all know who Marianne Williamson is?
Yeah.
Okay, so she's running for president.
She ran the last
Yeah.
time too.
Yeah, but she's running for president again.
Yeah.
And Gabor Mate, who is someone whom I know, Gabor Mate and her had a discussion that I ran upon a couple of days ago. I think they did it. And she speaks about her. I didn't pay attention to this last time, but I paid attention to this because of Gabor. I think he's brilliant, and his life and my life are kind of similar. And she spoke about the things that need to change in America, what her platform is. Actually, he spoke about her platform. He read her platform, which I didn't know anything about. What?
Oh yeah.
Who?
So
What?
again,
He's just like,
is a psychologist?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Gabor Mate. Gabor Mate is he's a doctor in Canada. He's a physician in Canada. He comes out of the Holocaust. He's Hungarian. Grew up in Hungary during the war. Was born during the war, and he's a healer. And he speaks on the circuits of spiritual people. And so he now has, I think, this podcast, and Marianne Williamson and he spoke, and I was very taken by the way actually he expressed what her platform is. And it had to do with what you were talking about. It had to do with the hierarchies, who's in charge, that whole system of government. And because she's running for president of the United States, she's talking about the United States. But I heard it, or now as I think about it, I heard it as global. And I really highly recommend listening to that, because the way he explains it, you know, it seems feasible. It really seems feasible. Only, of course, if people were behind that. And I don't think people are that unlazy to delve into all of that and see, you know, and make it happen at this point. but
Well-
I highly recommend that.
I think if we, if we can do smaller versions of that, I don't know.
Well, we
Absolutely.
we
Yeah,
have the
absolutely.
ability to create stuff
Well, I don't
here
know
in New York.
Looks like, right?
We have a
Well,
little.
it's not just that we have the ability to create stuff, we are creating it. I mean,
We
what
are.
have we
I mean,
created?
I've been in quest of this concept of what are these new communities the guide is talking about? How are they manifesting? And Traci, I wanted to ask you to talk about, because you're the most business oriented, focused, and practical person in the room.
Hello.
There she goes.
Um, just looking at your faces. It's nice to see you. This is, I think, the first lecture that I didn't pick. Teresa picked it. And so I read it with a great deal of interest, because the way I've picked the lectures in the past is just by getting into a meditative state, and a number appears in my head at some point, and that's really pretty much how it happens. But I'm aware enough to realize that Teresa volunteered this lecture, and so there was a reason for it. And I read it with a great deal of interest, and it was perfect timing for me, because like many people, I feel sad about the state of the world at this particular point, and in particular the wars that have manifested themselves in the last year. And I struggled with those feelings, wanting it to be over, wanting the suffering to be over. And at some point I broke through my own resistance, to use Juan's expression, surrendered to what is happening. More, not just on an intellectual level, I know I can't do anything, but also on an emotional level, where it is happening, and therefore it's supposed to happen. And then I started to work with that with this lecture. And I was fascinated by this sort of movement of between the group consciousness and the individual consciousness that the lecture started to talk about, and how unto all things there is a season, and there is a time for the individual to be more strongly grounded in the individual needs, and there is a time where those needs should give way to the group needs. And then to pick up on what else has been said tonight, that when we don't go with the flow, Juan was talking about this, but essentially what he was saying was that this, at any given point in time, there is a energy flow that's omnipresent, which is coming from the divine consciousness. And if we're in that stream and moving with that stream, we experience more peace than when we're trying to fight against it. And swimming up current, we used to say, I come from Virginia, you're swimming upstream without a paddle, and you're not going to get very far. So since this is happening now in the world, it almost feels like we've reached an inflection point, whichever way we're going to go, I think it's a good thing. Because when you read, and I talked about this with Amy Falchuk,
Yes.
When you reach an inflection point, it's almost like a boil that is being lanced, and it allows the negativity to come out. We couldn't go on much longer the way we were, because it seemed that we had gotten into a pattern of everybody for themselves, each man for himself, where I think the world and this flow that is happening right now is really demanding of us more of a group consciousness, more of one government, more of one God. And I'm starting to see that. I have a great deal of Jewish friends, and Joel is also Jewish, and they are saying things about what's happening now, which I would not have expected, and it wouldn't have happened, I don't think, 5 years ago, which is that while it was absolutely awful to be attacked and Hamas, coming out of the woodwork and killing all those innocent people at the music festival and taking the hostages, that it's not okay to slaughter the Palestinian civilians, that there's got to be something else besides what's happening. And for a Jewish person to say that, I think is very representative of a shift in consciousness, which is quite profound. And of course, I feel like that too, but it's easy for me because I'm not Jewish. And so I don't have the feelings of having had my people, first the Holocaust, and well, it's been going on forever.
I just want to say something as a Jewish person.
Okay.
There have always been people who have been against the expansion in Gaza. There have always been Jews who have done that. There have always been people who have seen that something was not quite right.
Yes. Yes.
And that voice was not heard. There were all kinds of things going on in Israel in the last year. And I think the belief that all Jews do not, have the same vision is, it offends me.
Of course, that there's always been the people who have had what you're saying. What I'm saying is now I see more and more and more. All of my friends now are evidencing this kind of an open-mindedness that you've described has always been around, which I think is a good thing to be able to see whatever issue you're talking about from more than just one side, more than your own individual perspective. And I see that happening in the world now in many ways. I saw this amazing thing going around on social media somewhere today, but it was a picture of a bunch of skeletons, and then underneath it said Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, male, female, and there was a whole bunch of these skeletons, and the point is that ultimately
we're all the same.
We're all the same.
Right.
You'll get past the surface differences, even male, female. So I think that there's some small movement in this direction, which I think is needed, because it's pretty clear that we can't go on the way we are. That it's
to the point that Sonia's making.
Yes.
There's the listening on the other
Yes,
side that
yes,
wasn't there.
yes.
And maybe the voice was always there, but now you're having more receptivity or listening to that voice. I don't know. Like it's a two-way thing, right?
Or the voices may be louder, or more people are hearing it. It's hard to put
Whatever it
into
is,
words.
it's bubbling.
It's bubbling up to the surface.
As
an awareness,
a non-Jew, I hear it more.
Me too. As an awareness that.
So maybe it's on our side, we hearing, the exchanges.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now, Alan, I'm
Joel.
not sure, but at the beginning of the conversation, I thought I heard a question that we're not clear that things have happened in the last 50 years as to these individual groups developing and this transformation of consciousness. Is that
Yes, I mean, I also
is that
think,
unclear that we haven't seen?
well, I mean,
shifting
I think that we
consciousness?
have to evaluate
What
the shift in
reason?
consciousness. I mean, and I really
You
like,
see it or you don't?
I do.
I do.
I like what you
I
said,
see.
Kevin, about it's not gonna
insidious
happen
almost.
overnight. We're
Yeah,
having,
We're in the
it
midst
could
of
be
it.
a couple hundred
Right.
years.
Our lives
Right.
are small and short compared to these
The
changes.
surface, it's very subtle, but if you're watching, I can see
So
it
in that
now.
context, I mean, I do welcome a discussion about what our task is here in the New York Region Pathwork. And I think that it's wonderful to see that we're all strong individuals, because I think we are. We're not individuals who believe that we have to get it from the outside, right? And I think we've grown enough to realize that really it's within. And if we feel a lack and we feel an incapacity, then it's something for us to work on. It's not something that we're going to get from the outside. So that makes a group strong and powerful when
Yes.
everyone, yeah, Marion.
I just want to comment on that because personally in my life, I equate it with what's happening universally, locally, New York City, and then the state and the whole world. And that is just what I'm putting a word in there, Alan, a detachment, is that on my spiritual path, I've been called to look at every outer source that I have, that I give them a power over me, versus me finding it all within my power, my source. This is the most rigorous part of my path. And I've been through everything. And I've experienced who I already am. So, but I have to be this human Marion here in this life, and I have to be her. And that is detachment means I'm always having to look for my personal process. It's personal. It's images and all of that, to live this new age, new humanity, and live it now, not in 650 years when it will peak, but now, because the seeds are planted now. And that is what I have as outer sources. And it's all karmic attachments. So I've been taken through the ones of my parents. They were long gone, but it was in another dimension. It wasn't in this physical world. It was where there's no mind chatter, of the total release of the souls that manifested my parents in this life. And that's where I experienced unconditional love like I've never known. And I've had 2 children, 4 grandchildren. I've had a lot of love in my life. However, I'm in the process of letting them all go as a source to get anything from. So this is right in my face, because I don't know if anybody else has got children and grandchildren, but it's like the ones I used to take care of as little babies and little toddlers and all that, they're now like 22 years old and 18, 19. They're in other parts of the world, and having tea with grandma is not one of their big exciting moments, even though they love me. So life has given me, and I've chosen it before I came here, to face every karmic attachment that I have. And it is the most rigorous path, is to release everyone that I have, everyone and everything, whether it's a government or a grandson, that I have an expectation with. Expectation is different than I'm planting seeds to grow this new humanity and look at everything in myself, because we're all part of it right now. It's not going to happen. It's happening now. And the guide teaches this, the seeds are now that we're planting. So I just want to say about that word detachment. It's like, oh my gosh, that is like, to release all karmic attachments is, I can't do it without a lot of support, a lot of help, a lot of hand holding from my God self. Yeah.
So here's where the group comes in to nourish these strong individuals.
Yes.
I know that you needed that when you got hit by that bike.
Absolutely. I
Right.
had three near-death experiences in 7 months. It totally changed my life because it left me with no mask. So I have to process my boundaries in the moment. Yeah. So, and knowing that, yes, to live the new humanity now, the new age, is to, that's why I say, know my lower self. It's through the lower self. It's through the lower self that, so I'm looking at that and those teachings and how to apply that in my daily life, because I'm having to do it moment to moment. I fall off the wagon, then I get back on. So I say the tools in the toolbox. One of you said something about that. The more tools I have in my toolbox, the faster I can get back on my center, because I'm falling off constantly. Because I use the metaphor, if I'm building a mansion and I've only got a hammer and a nail, I'm not going to get very far. But if I want to, put up a picture frame on my wall, I don't need my power saw that I need to build a mansion. So it's having that intelligence to have a toolbox that meets every situation.
So Marion, with that, so then are you saying like you're working on detachment from these karmic attachments, like you would extrapolate that out to the group? Like that?
What do you mean?
Like detaching from the current structures we have or something? And
well, yes, of course, our government, we're talking about the government, I think, and what Ellen said, all very, high spiritual teachers say that humanity, evolution of consciousness, has come so far that we're ready to govern ourselves. We're ready to have a government that supports us rather than one that dictates us and presses down on us. We are ready. We're ready now. So, so it's like, how do I live that? You know, I have my rebellious self and I have my self that surrenders, and I have all these many selves in there. The key is knowing who's out there doing what part of me is interacting with my, you know, my personal life, and some on the level, as I say, of government, and some personal family things. And I thought, wow, well, I in my to-do list, I have across the top all my toolbox, you know, of all the things I can pull out to help me get back on my center, because it's back and forth very rapidly. And I think that's happening with everybody who's conscious, like all of us, you know.
Well, I really like that as a project, you know, Marion. I think we should have a New York Region Pathwork toolbox. And I think we should on our website, the different things that we can do.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
One of the extrapolations, though, that you mentioned about taking from what Marion was talking about and then bringing it out into these hierarchical structures, and she utilized the words expectation. And if you take that and you move that out and project it out into our structures, what we tend to do, and it's all of us, no one's innocent of this in a sense, we all tend to have expectations of our leadership. Okay, and we wish our leadership to lead us and to do it for us, to make the decisions for us, to make the assignments for us, to lay out the responsibility patterns that each person has to play as a cog in this hierarchical pattern. As a manager myself, I did it. So, you know, one of the things that I wish to put out into this world for us here in this meeting is maybe in the next few weeks, we should take an internal meditation, each of us, that want to contribute, and to allow our own natures to grow our own area of this, whatever that might be, and seek out where we're expecting from others to do the work. Okay, and rather share those ideas in a communal sense. So maybe we should, as part of the members, right, or as part of the, I guess, technically that's the hard part, is that organizations on this earth are made with leadership already. Okay, so they're already, it's implicit, right, that we're going to have some board of trustees. But I think where we need to break from that a little bit is to recognize that the board is not there to pull everyone along, right? And in a sense, we have to be able to provide some opportunities for grass to grow, and others need to provide some of that content naturally into those areas that are open. All of us need to provide that, not others.
Yeah, I always feel like it should be more collaborative.
Collaboration.
Even like a Google Docs document to start things like that, online tools.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That would be, we could do that.
Exactly, a place to voice ideas. Yeah,
We could do
exactly.
that.
Collaboration. There's a ton of
Consider it
tools
done.
now.
Yeah, there are so many tools now. Like I just got a Google Pixel 8 Pro, and the damn thing has like, I don't know, like 30 apps built in. Google has like apps for everything. You name it.
Mm.
Yeah. So yeah, collaborative tools like just built right into the platform.
Yeah.
Yeah. Consider it done. We'll put it together.
So Marion, I really relate to what you were talking about, what I heard you say. And I was, you said you were 87, I just turned 80. And I'm wondering if age has anything to do with it, because I also just became a grandmother. And my image of what a grandmother is and feels and what the responsibilities are not at all what I'm feeling. You know, it's very, very different. And so it brings me to, you know, the guy talked a lot about images. And I went to your mother a lot, Ellen, to have her explain images to me. I could never understand what the heck that meant. What is that? But I understand it now. I don't know why I understand it now, but I understand it now. And the way I understand it is that there are agreements that we all make with one another, that something is true, and then we go forth into the world following what we all agree is true. And I think, since I've been 80, it's like, well, I used to think this is true, but I don't think it's true anymore, and I think that that's an image that's kind of, that I don't somehow need any longer. So I just want to put that out. And I think when you're younger and when there's less space there's much more space in my life now. I think when you're younger and you're trying to get it all done, get your relationship done and having your children done and your job done and your tasks done, there's very little space. There's not as much space to cogitate these things in our hearts. That's how I feel it.
It's funny because you talk about images as a collective image. I always think of it as a personal image, like my misconception, what do I think is true? But that's true that we do have collective images.
Yes, things that we
all
agree
think are true and they're not.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when I said
consciousness, right?
Mass image.
Right.
Yeah, that the guide talks about in this lecture, the mass consciousness versus the group consciousness, where you have different perspectives of the same thing, and it's not, everybody doesn't think of it exactly the same way. Like you don't have to believe. I was raised Catholic, and I always remember that learning the creed. I believe in God. I believe this. I believe that. And as a little kid, I remember saying, "Well, why are they telling me what I believe? They don't know what I believe."
Exactly.
But that's the
image.
They're bringing you into the mass consciousness. Like you have to believe this.
Well, I think this is the gift of Donald Trump. There is no objective truth. It's your own truth. There is no received truth. There is no a truth from the authority that we're going to get anymore.
Alternate
It's
that's the other.
he blew up the whole thing.
Yeah.
So now it's like, your own personal intuition, your own personal connection is the truth. Right.
The personal ego.
Which I wrote this down because I actually, sometimes I listen to the audios because I really like listening to Eva. It feels like connected more for some reason. I know other people don't feel that way, but anyway, in the Q&A section and stuff, there was this whole discussion, but they talked, the guide talked more about dualism, and dualism is the group and the individual, right? And you can have distortions of either one. So you can have the group consciousness, which is, the aligned, the truth, and you can have the mass consciousness, which is the distortion. But you can also have the individual, where you have the false independence, like I am a rock, I'm an island or whatever. And then you have the true self, the real self-realized person who knows we're interdependent, but also can grow as an individual and be a strong, true to the individual. And I was thinking about it, you can have like this crisscross, you can have distortions of the group, and so when you get into the dualistic fight of things, one side always takes the distortion and uses it against the other side, but then they can both be distorted, which is what we have a lot of the times. They're both just, there's no truth, or everybody believes the same thing.
Right.
And there's both the individual and the group are distorted, but then you can also have, they're either one side off or both in truth. So
I want to add one thing to what you're saying. What you're saying is exactly, it resonates so well with this lecture, as well as what I was feeling when we were talking about Donald Trump briefly. And the main thing that draws me to that often is in this lecture, it talks about appreciation of the unitive consciousness. It's toward the end of this lecture, and I forget exactly where, but having that appreciation, that's where the capital T is for truth. There is no individual version of the capital T, but the problem is we're so lost in ourselves being of form, and we're so lost of things being important, but things are just a manifestation of the spirit. And that spirit is ultimately unified, even though we've wanted to fracture the spirit. So, when we talk about the truth, yeah, it's good on the level of form that maybe there's a positive idea that, again, these different factions in the level of form are, oh, group, no, individual, there is no truth, it's all relative, and it just keeps doing this back and forth. But ultimately, what this is an internal struggle that's occurring in our world, where ultimately we're parsing out that it's all leading towards the unitive state. And I could even go so far as beyond this world and say part of our galactic organization, where ultimately I'm sure as the day is done, like that we're being monitored in some way as a planetary consciousness, whether or not we can take part in that galactic organization in a sense, and whether or not that's in the level of form or in a different dimension, whatever. But without a doubt,
Right.
the world is not the end goal. What do you think? The Earth exists? I mean, I'm not speaking to anyone here, but of course, we can see that, just like we did with the United States, just like we did with individual clans, just like we did with NATO or whatever it is that groups together. These groups are just ways to, again, expand, and then the Earth is the same thing to something larger. So, and that doesn't mean I can appreciate personally the unitive state, but I think what it states is the ability to utilize that and to connect with it occasionally is a big game changer. It is.
Well, we all experience the unitive state every day. We may not acknowledge it, but the
Yeah.
guide is very specific about that. There's the individualized state, that's the 100-100. There's the universal self, that's the 50-50. And then there's the unitive state, which is 100%, there's no duality. And that's in the lectures.
Right.
That's in the lectures. And we all could dip in and out of them throughout our day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in this lecture, the guy says there is no other somewhere there.
Right.
Essentially, we are all one.
Yep.
We're all diamond threads, just one. We are just, as I say, in a huge mass of, there's a huge reservoir of energy. And we all one, really. There is no other. So there's no other nation, there's no other, Joe and Juan and Kevin, we are all essentially one energy.
Well, it's a beautiful vision that the guide has, He often says this. He says this, that, we're all amazingly unique and individual. There's something special. I mean, I think that the guide says, correct me if I'm wrong, that, people or souls are grouped into certain kinds of families or certain kinds of groups, but then we also have our particular individuality, which is specific and remarkable and unique. So I just thought, like, okay, how many different snowflakes are there? How many different leaves are there? But something about us is unique. And of course, when we realize our uniqueness, then we realize our individuality in the truest sense, and then we can be strong and contribute to a group and make a group powerful.
Yep.
Right?
Once we make ourselves strong individually, then we can join the group and contribute.
Bring our gifts.
Our
unique.
exactly, the gifts.
Our uniqueness.
Our uniqueness, right?
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And say about the hierarchy that you were saying earlier, I read in one of the lectures that this is not so important, but
Go on. Here we go.
okay. Pertaining, I think if I understood correctly, Teresa, you were saying that you kind of resist the hierarchy. The hierarchy order. Was that what you were saying earlier?
Well,
That you were not too happy with that, and I'm sorry.
But then I feel like our structures are very hierarchical.
Yeah.
And what's happening is a flattening. Yeah. As a matter of fact.
Okay. So,
The world, the Earth is flat. It's written about 20 years ago.
Hmm.
But it was talking about how the economies are becoming more distributed, flattened, and I think even in terms of
I'm sorry.
individual- Yeah, just being more collaborative in general. As opposed to-
trend corporate America right
It
now.
is.
Yeah.
Flatten the organization.
But you okay?
Not so many-
That's what I was going to say, because I read in some of the lectures, and one of the lectures that the guy actually said that this hierarchy order that we copy in this on this plane, earthly plane, is actually a copy of what's going on in the spirit world also. He said even in hell, they have this hierarchy order. There is Satan, there is his brother, and there is other, smaller hierarchy, the demons that also rule. And of course, we see that in the divine, in the spirit world.
Well, I think
The
that
divine world.
that whole
So that
Pathwork,
order is there, really, even in the spirit world.
yeah, the whole Pathwork homology is kind of interesting. I think that what the guide has said is that the kind of the demons are locked into a kind of rigid hierarchical structure where separation and domination are the main principles, and where basically this may sound silly, but you got to do what the bigger devil is telling you to do, because otherwise you're going to suffer. Kind of like the Screw Tape Letters, if you read that. But on the other hand, the divine hierarchy is different. It's based on free will and the flowering of the self. So it's not a hierarchy of oppression and domination and separation. It's a hierarchy of well, I guess it really becomes unity, because obviously all of us are divine, have divine attributes, or are divine to our nature, and in that sense we're incomparable. No one could compare one divine spirit or manifestation to another. Everyone just fills their part in the big scheme.
Alan, what do you think about this, about hierarchy? I believe there's a hierarchy amongst the angels as well.
Yeah.
God being on top. But it's not based on selfishness and manipulation. It's based on the ability of the people who are the spirits or the entities that are leading. It's based on their abilities and their goodness. And in the way it manifests on our planet, it's no, I don't know if it was ever based on that. I would hope that it was, at least sometimes, but it's not based on that any longer. I mean, take a look at the guy who's running for president of the United States. He's a fucking crook and a stupid one. And, there's nothing there's nothing in him that can give us anything, that can raise us in any way, that can give us what we all long for and need. So the hierarchy on our planet is infested. What do you think?
It's what? It's what?
Infested.
Oh.
It's just not clear.
Well, I mean, I think that Trump is the end of a long line of the demystification of authorities. The church and the king were divinely appointed, and you had to bow down and worship. You had to bow down and accept their divine authority. Okay.
And do you think it ever was divine authority?
Well, I'm not sure if any kings were divinely inspired, but they certainly put that forward, adopted that as a mantle.
I mean, King Solomon, maybe.
There were good kings, allegedly. Jesus, of course, was a king, but he was humble, and of course he came here nakedly and suffered.
Yeah, and he didn't remember. He didn't remember that he was a king.
Yes, he did.
Well, yeah, I think he did, because when the
Yes, he did.
devil took him up and tempted him, you can have this whole thing if you just bow down and worship me. So perhaps he knew that. In any case, though, I think that and also what's interesting is all the deep fakes and fake news and stuff, where now you can create a video of anybody doing anything to anyone. That basically says, okay, I'm throwing it back on you, the individual, to determine what the truth is and what you believe. You outside symbols, representations are no longer trustworthy. Trump, the president's no longer trustworthy. So where is the truth? We're thrown back on our own resources, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. That's true.
Yeah, so that's where we are right now. It's wonderful that we can collaborate together, strong individuals, and we will put up the Google tools and we'll collaborate online.
Yes. And I'm going to, because I love it. It's important to have a sense of humor about all this too. I don't mean about the tragedies on the earth, but a sense of humor about being here as a human being. I mean, come on. So because as you know, and this is what I was bringing up in the beginning, I always bring up about my dominant, personality trait that the guide brings out. And that is that to look good, be the good girl. That's my emotion type. And bury my complaints, bury them, because I don't want to look bad to anybody. So what I've had to do over the many years is complain. And so, but I complain to God. So even my complaints bring me closer to my real self. So I have in my to-do list every day 3 main complaint sessions. and I look at my spiritual master's photograph. I use that as a tool, not as a worship.
Why?
And I say, okay, this is my time. I'm going to let it rip. And something may trigger it, a person or something of life situation. I name it, but I state my intention, because there's that lecture, The Power of the Word. It is so important what words we use, the vibration they are. So I say to my God self, I say, I'm now going to clear what so-and-so has triggered in me, because nobody causes it. What so-and-so has triggered in me, so I may be filled with your light, love, and life. And then I let it rip. I'm so grateful for my core training. And that is, I can, so me being emotion, I bring out a lot of emotions. I beat everybody up. I throw them off the George Washington Bridge. I do all that stuff, but it's with the intention of clearing, not harming anyone. And so then when I'm finished, I vibrate and I ground, and I'm smiling. And I'm just so grateful. And so I thought, well, gratitude is the foundation of our life, our gratitude for everything, even the trials, even what we're going through, the crises we're going through. I thought the crisis lecture is really fabulous, because what comes out of this crisis is harmony and balance.
Yeah. I want to just add
Yes.
one last
And then we'll
one
have our
point.
meditation.
One thing I wanted to add, because it was mentioned a little bit about hierarchical structures in heaven as well as hell and so forth, and these different types of spirits. I also want to reflect on that with regards to how we envision what God is. And then lastly, I want to reflect upon what we think our pathwork is here and our local organization, because all of those items share common traits. And any organization here, whether it be New York Region Pathwork or something else, can really go to hell. Okay, or it can go the opposite direction. And it depends upon how we look upon the spirit of that organization. Just like we look on St. Michael or one of the archangels or something to this effect. When we look at our pathwork, it's none of us individually that make that organization, the spirit, what it is. And yet it's all of us collectively as individuals that bring the best of us to that organization. And thus that organization has a consciousness. Okay? Just like we tend to look on the heavenly spirits as having individuality and praying to them as idols or sometimes as other things. And also how many of us have a God image, where we may look upon God as an individual or as this external creator that zaps the world into being and then sits off in the corner. Rather, Pathwork has spoken many times about the universe coming out of the very nature and the essence of the energies of God. And so, in a sense, right, nothing can be without God's infused energy and Christ consciousness, like Juan was saying before. And so all I would say is, if we're looking to do that with our group, then again, it comes back to that collaboration, but it comes back towards also having a vision of what the group is and keeping that vision collectively important for us so that we honor that vision of what the group is in the best of all of us together, right? And so that becomes a positive spirit with which will guide us in all of our collaborative efforts. And it has its own consciousness and free will associated with all of our individual wills beneath it. So, there are many spiritualities that speak of this. And the fact that each of us as individuals, we may have as well have many different voices within us, fragmentary items that came from other areas of creation. And we pulled those together. And now we're pulling this together. And now it's going to keep pulling together until ultimately we can come back and be one again. Okay, so in this sense, I think we can do the same with the pathwork. Right. And also we have to choose not just the angels of our individual nature, but rather our collective. and stay with that and envision it that way each time. And if somebody gets off course with that, to lovingly bring us back to what the vision is, right?
Can you write a mission statement?
Yeah.
I can do my best.
Yeah, a vision is very important.
I
A
will
vision,
try and
As the
share.
treasurer, you are elected to do that.
because a vision
put-
is not a vision is not a goal. A vision is
Right.
just what we describe. It's an energy. It's a feeling. It's a color. It's music. It's a vision, and it's very important. Very important.
Very important. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the way you framed
It
that.
leads us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so shall I read a brief passage from the lecture and then we'll have our 15-minute meditation? All right? Okay.
Yeah. We're gonna let you.
Once
read
you're
it
done
through.
reading, I'll turn off the lights.
Sure, sounds good. And now let me get the candle.
Careful, with the touch, careful with the touch.
Got that out.
It's got-
Oh, I need a light. Give me
He's
give me
a
another
fire
match.
walker.
Got another match or candle went out?
Oh, you're not.
There, nice.
Don't we have some?
Yeah.
Thank you. This, the wick fell. Maybe I can make it happen. We have another candle?
Yeah. You want
Oh, wait,
another
I think it's gonna work.
He did it.
We got it, Jolie.
Okay.
That works.
Excellent.
All right.
And you? There's no food here. I'm not at zero. I'll go to that. Sorry.
No comida.
All right. I'm gonna read this from the lecture, last paragraph or so. But humankind has now reached a much higher potential of development, and those who follow this potential will therefore be swept onward by this inner movement as never before. If you wish, you can tune into this force and truly use it for your transformation. In this respect, you are not yet doing as much as you could, although your progress individually and as a group is very substantial. You do not yet tune in enough to this force, which is operative in the universal consciousness and therefore also in you. You still cling to the belief that this or that problem or attitude of yours cannot be changed. By doing that, you not only make yourself unavailable to the new consciousness and this energy force that streams inside of you, but you also endanger yourself, because this force will then reverse the process and bring you into a crisis that could have been avoided. The force is there, whether you use it consciously or not. If you use it consciously and wisely and follow it and go with it, it will bring you into undreamed of unfoldment and enrichment. If you stem against it in blind fear and stubbornness, it will turn against you. This is the law. It is no evil force per se that is doing it. It is only the denial of the movement of the whole, the divine flow. Whether you deny it because of ignorance, stubbornness, or anything else makes little difference. So I say to you, my friends, you are in a wonderful process of awakening. Wake up more. Take your out of your numbness. Look at it, feel it, the force within you. It is the living Christ force that can transform the negative material, the stagnant attitude, into an entirely new expression. Do not hug your negative thoughts and convictions. The force is there the moment you embrace it, the moment you turn to it, the moment you lift your face to it, allegorically, inwardly, symbolically. Lift your hands to it, allow it, and go with it. So much has already happened in this respect. It can be activated more to the wonderful unfoldment of each of your lives. Okay, 15 minutes.